So we scripted ourselves quite heavily at first. But then what we noticed is that what we lost was this just natural, like what needs to be said right now. We're starting to trust that even though where we moved from less script, more like, what do we want to make sure that lands? What are the 2 or 3 things? And then let the rest show up based on what's emerging in that moment. So being more organic, but also really just following where people are and what they need right now.
I think you just hit it, right? It's when you're present, you can access that information. When you are so scripted and being held captive almost to what you've written, you don't have that flexibility in the conversation. So in a lot of the work that we do, you've got a section, no matter who's doing what, somebody is doing the primary and somebody is going to either fill in the gaps where they think maybe instruction wasn't quite there or something was missed, or if that person felt like there was just one more thing that needed to be added. And then to maybe give a chance to tie that all together at some point. And you can't do that in a 100% scripted environment. Sorry guys, doggy emergency.
Okay. That means no?
Don't know what that means. So do we go ahead or wait?
We can do it another day.
I can assume go. I guess that means we go ahead.
Okay. Oh, without him?
I'll ask that.
We don't want to go without him. We can reschedule.
That is not a good background. Okay, so he is not available. Okay.
Well, I guess my question is for you. How do you feel about just rescheduling?
I don't mind.
Me either. I like having the 3 of us.
Is there something else you want to talk about?
I don't know. What if we talked about co-facilitating?
Co-facilitating? What's in there that you want to talk about? Like how to co-facilitate?
Yeah, just what it takes to co-facilitate. There's just a lot to. People think that takes pressure off of you, and in one aspect it does, but it also puts added pressure on you in another spot, right? How do you
take care
of me? Huh?
Do tell.
Well, we have seen the benefits of co-facilitating for a few reasons. One is that I like the idea that there's different voices around a piece of learning, a tool, because we say things differently.
Right, and it resonates in a different way with different sorts of learners.
Yeah.
So something that you say might land with somebody, but something the way I phrase it might land with somebody else.
And that the more you let that, what we've learned is the less scripted we are around that. So at first we were like maybe it was me, Ian, but no. I wanted.
It wasn't just you.
No, okay. Yeah. We wanted to do it well, and I think we scripted ourselves, and we learned over time. And that sometimes when you're starting to build a relationship and figure out, it's actually another different style of conversation dance. You are truly dancing together seamlessly. You want to create that space that it flows very well and looks like it's well thought out. So we scripted ourselves quite heavily at first, but then what we noticed is that what we lost was this just natural, like what needs to be said right now. So starting to trust that even though where we moved from less script, more like, what do we want to make sure that lands? What are the 2 or 3 things? And then let the rest show up based on what's emerging in that moment. So being more organic, but also really just following where people are and what they need right now.
I think you just hit it, right? It's when you're present, you can access that information. When you are so scripted and being held captive almost to what you've written, you don't have that flexibility in the conversation. So in a lot of the work that we do, you've got a section, no matter who's doing what, somebody is doing the primary and somebody is going to either fill in the gaps where they think maybe instruction wasn't quite there or something was missed, or if that person felt like there was just one more thing that needed to be added. And then to maybe give a chance to tie that all together at some point. And you can't do that in a 100% scripted environment.
Yeah, so early on, we kind of almost had like, you have this block and that's the block, to you're the primary in this block, right? And I'm going to create a couple of pauses that'll just allow you to, if there's something I missed, or if there's a piece that just really will support what's emerging, you'll add in. And the other thing we have done, you said the word tied, which I really love. We called it a bow. Remember we said, and you put the bow on it, which is because the person who's primary has had a specific responsibility to drop in certain things to make sure that the learning is, full and follows all the process so people can be successful. But so that your role is you can relax into that and just add a bow on it at the end. I think that's really served us well, and it really managed the time too.
It also gives you a break between blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So you can attend that block in a certain way that supports that block, and the other person's supporting the back end, if there's questions that pop through, or there's maybe just the way something was phrased didn't make sense to you, you can add some clarity in that free space that comes up in that pause, without being like intrusive or getting in the way or stepping on each other's toes in that regard.
Mm-hmm. And I think what shifted for us is from a learning perspective, from going from in the room together, which we had a little cue that we would do, which is when whoever was leading, remember, we would be sitting, and then we have the roadmap in front of us, the one we've developed to make sure everything's clear and concise and moves through. And so if you miss something, it's not like I go, wait a minute, you forgot something. I would stand up, and that was my cue, or your cue, depending who was in lead, to say, Karen, is there something you want to add? And so it just looked really natural that was happening, not that there was a misstep in the process. So now, though, we don't have that with the virtual world. And so the bow.
There's no way for me to stand up.
It doesn't look real good on Zoom. So what we've created, though, it's kind of cool. Like, it's taken us time to find the right way to do this, or the way that works well for us, is just making sure there's those pauses, not just at the end, like maybe halfway and then at the end. And then of course there's always the bow still in our roadmap to tie it up together.
And that's a recent development. That's like over time, understanding that there are opportunities for an interjection or something that could add some spice to the meal or whatever, but it wasn't there at the beginning. We didn't realize that was something required. Like, oftentimes maybe you'll be talking and I'd have like, oh, I got something, but I don't have a place to put it in. And by the time I have a chance to put it in, it doesn't fit in anymore. It doesn't belong there. It would take us out of the flow if I said, oh, back in there, you once said, and I should add that. It just doesn't work anymore. It seems too disjointed. It's like going through a book and saying, go back 2 chapters and then add a chapter. Like, it doesn't work. You can't do that. So at least it doesn't work well.
Mm-hmm.
So that development over time is kind of learning each other's rhythms and adapting how you guys want to show up in a co-facilitative space.
Right. And because we are attending to the whole always, I know I'm watching the time clock, because that's my support when you're in the lead.
In action.
The time. Yeah, when you're in action. So if I'm going to add something, I'm not going to over talk that. So I have to be very mindful. First of all, this is your space. And it's important that people feel that. And the second thing is to just, what is it that I need? This is the big learning that we're going to be talking about when we do our facilitator guide for the peer coaching, is not over talking something.
Mhm.
So what's the nugget to be able to distill down? That's enough. So I think that, again, over time, we've realized that they don't need it all at once.
Right. And the other thing is the restraint in not sharing. When you've got something to share, but is it my ego that wants to share it, or is it really going to serve the room? So being able to hold on to whatever that thing is, knowing that enough has been shared, and that if that nugget deserves airtime, it will show up again at some other point, and use it then.
Mm.
So the restraint in there is also a key. I mean, you've got a time clock, you've got blocks that have to be hit. You can't always be adding more just because you've got another good story. It really has to have purpose and meaning in the time frame that you have to use.
Yeah, I agree. And we're starting to shift towards, even now, I feel, as you grow your rhythm, you said something about our shared rhythm, because it's quite different, but they complement each other, is that now we're even sharing blocks more.
Right.
Knowing that there's just a way you say something. And then so as you start to work together more and more, you start to see the way Ian says it. So this is tying into the ego side for me, Ian, is you say it so well, I don't want to say that part. That's a part that just, you've got a way of saying it. So giving those parts away, and just like, it's not about who had how many now, right?
Right. Yeah, there's not a point scoring system in the facilitator roadmap. I have let go of instructions. I am totally fine with letting go of instructions. I know I don't deliver them nearly as succinctly and as clearly, and that's fine. I have my strengths, and Karen has hers. So knowing where, I mean, there's two sides of that. There's knowing who's really good at something and letting it go, and then there's wanting to refine and get better at it. So it's knowing your place, and then knowing when is the time to push that boundary, and to stretch yourself a little bit from time to time. And there's no right or wrong in it. It's finding the rhythm, right?
And always at the end, like making sure that you're doing that reflection and using the feedback model that we have to capture what went well, what was tricky, and what we would do differently the next time. Because it's never, you are in the moment. I find, I show up differently depending on how I am that day. So I might, you in the fall, when I didn't know I was having some health, I wasn't feeling the greatest, but I was having some health issues, and I kept saying to you, Ian, I'm so sorry, like, I'm just not sharp. And so being able to have that support system, and being able to talk about, this is my off day, can you carry me here? And that's really cool to do as well.
I think we've both had those moments where you just need the support of your partner in crime in the moment, and you ask for it. So especially if you're aware of it before you're going into any session, that you can ask for what you need, and be okay with what's showing up. It's a shared space, and it takes some trust. And the more you do it, the more you can trust that your partner is going to have you when you do the what is it, the trust fall, whatever, you know that person's going to be there to catch you. So yeah.
And I think the third thing I would say that keeps it really strong as well when you co-facilitate is the pre-work we do together, Ian. So although we have broken out the parts, we have co-created the flow together. So it's not like it's easy to go away and say you'll do it, but that piece is done first. And then it's okay, now you go do this part block your way, this way. We still follow the rigor of the roadmap, but co-creating has been really important, because you have to feel comfortable with that.
And that's a process.
It is.
It's not, it's not, that rapport is not going to be built in one session or in one, like it just takes time for it to develop, and just to keep working at it until you find kind of the secret recipe sauce that's going to work for you in that moment. And be okay with it. It's going to get better. Your butter tarts have gotten a little bit better over time, right? And it's just learning what works for you batch to batch. And that feedback model supports that too, because you're constantly upping your game notch by notch based on what you did in that each successive session.
And being really clear about what you're going to do some reflection and feedback on before you do it. Okay, let's talk about what do we want to evaluate? So we often, you and I and Mark will say, okay, we want to talk about timing, we want to talk about design, we want to talk about just how we interacted. So you have a bit of a criteria that you're going to go away and reflect on. So it allows you to look at the whole picture.
Right, and not just harp on the one or two things that didn't go the way you had envisioned.
So I personally, for me, and you know this, in the last few years, I don't want to do it alone. Like once you have a partnership, for me, I just feel the work is better, the outcomes are better, the experience is better, I'm better when I have a co-facilitator. And I would have said maybe 5 years ago or more, I wouldn't have wanted that. And so I would say to some people that feels, because some people are like, oh man, this is tough. You got to work together. Yes, there's some real benefits. You obviously are running the show and it's all about you, and you may be very good at that. But I see the impact that it's had on the products, on design, on the experience, and on the participants.
Well, you get to leverage each other's abilities and talents. Whereas if you were on your own, maybe you're outsourcing some of that, or you're trying to take on things that aren't really your jam. So instructions aren't something I lay down as solidly as could be. And then things get clunky along the way because the instructions weren't solid. So being able to rely on somebody's force can be quite helpful.
Well, and even you, like, look at, because I know that's been my natural gift. I think that's what we talk about, is do you know what you're really good at? And as this was a question about, people don't often know what their natural gifts are. And once people tell you that, can you kind of integrate that and acknowledge it? And how do you, like, always talk about it, use it for good? And for you, like the videos that you do, like, and the way you can put things together and keep it simple and succinct and clear, and it's really powerful. And I know you've been practicing that for a long time. So why would I get in the way of that? Mm-hmm. So, the design stuff, so it's just really kind of tugging and pulling on the strengths that you each bring to the table. And again, that's just the ego again saying, it's not that I'm bad at it, just you're really good at it.
Right. And it takes me probably a lot less effort. And we've had back and forths on PowerPoints and how things should work and how do they work and whatnot. And why put yourself through the headache of doing that when you can get a quick tutorial from somebody who already knows what that is? Mm-hmm. So you can let go of a few things that you don't have to carry the burden of if you share that responsibility and share each other's gifts.
Do we want to go to like the hard part of co-facilitating? With the challenges or whatever language we want to use?
Well, why not? Why not? So yes, there's always two sides to a coin. Mm-hmm. So what's one thing that pops up for you as a challenge in this regard?
because I've done this is not a reflection of you. I've done a lot of co-facilitation.
It's okay, because when you said maybe 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said that I like to co-facilitate. I'm like, how long have we been together?
But you're the exception.
No, go ahead. I'm totally.
But I would say, like, because I've done a lot of, this over a number of years, I did a lot on my own. And I did co-facilitate, or I would be assigned co-facilitators. And again, this is not a negative that I'm saying, but what I started to see over time, because it's so important that you have this syncing up of how you do it. So one of the downsides I've seen is when there's lack of kind of commitment to getting ready. So I know what it takes when that the dry run, the preparation, is a direct correlation to the success of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone doesn't feel that's as important or want to make the time, just want to get to the session, that's when I know I'm getting concerned, because we haven't sussed out what happens if, like, we've had some, very different scenarios, system crashes, or someone doesn't show up, or there's a conflict in the room. So if you haven't done all of that pre-work and sussed out how that's going to roll as in the co-facilitation. So that's been a challenge for me in the past. And I've seen how it affects the day of.
Yes. Yeah, and when we had a pretty good example of what happens when you think you've got it under control and you don't, or you think you understand who's doing what. When we did a particular, I can't remember what you call it now, but the listening exercise. Yeah, and so I thought I knew exactly what I was doing. Yeah. I got part one, you got part two, blah, blah, blah. And then when it came to actually do it in the room, I did not have it down. And I derailed the whole bus, or the whole train, because I thought I knew already. Mm-hmm. And we, even though we dry run everything else, that was the one thing we didn't do. And that really threw off the session to begin with. And doing those dry runs is it might seem like it's not necessary, but it's because I thought it wasn't necessary that it became necessary. So again, part of it is, yes, we're busy and we don't want to waste our time, but that planning time is not wasted time. It will save you time, energy, effort, smoothness, a lot of stress and heartache if things go awry that you didn't have to, and you'll just be better set up and less stressed in the moment if something does go a little haywire that is out of your control, where something turns off, or like in Mark's situation where his dog took the router right out of the wall. Like, you can't plan for that stuff, and that's fine, but you can control and plan as best you can within the confines of your roadmap. And you can, if you do that prep work, that other stuff you'll figure it out in the moment. There's no other way to do it. But the other stuff was totally in your control up until then. So take the time.
Well, again, if you've looked at the worst case scenario and what plan B would be when it happens, and if it does happen, it's smooth sailing. So yeah, the conversations, and that, we talk about prep work. I think the conversations are important. Mm-hmm. So that we're really confident, and the words I always talk about: confidence first, competence second. That we have the confidence that we're ready, and that we're on the same kind of trajectory and page. So that would be one thing that I learned. When that isn't there, it's a clue to me that there's some tension and we need to work that out. So that conversation when you're starting to make a decision to co-facilitate is important. What about you? What's one for you?
Well, actually, sorry, that kind of leads me to ask, so then do you need to be choosy as to who you choose to be a co-facilitator?
I prefer that, but I've often been given people. So yes, ideally finding the right kind of person that works well with you and I mean, I recommend people then going forward, because then it's easy peasy to do that. But when I've been given somebody, I have learned that conversation is super important. And so knowing what isn't going to happen. The worst case scenarios that I've had, Ian, where it's been crash and burns, have been when I've been assigned somebody and that has the conversation has not happened and something's happening in the room. Because what happens is they'll turn to you going, well, you got to fix this. So yeah, if you can choose one, for me, that's ideal, but sometimes that doesn't happen if you're working with an organization. And so the willingness to learn, 90% of the time, it's been, even when I am assigned somebody, I've had an extremely positive outcome. Because my offer is to help them, because if they're saying I'm not quite, because I want to talk about this one. It's kind of, I don't know if I'm going into the wrong, but it is one. When, and I've said this to you, when someone feels less than you, so they're coming in maybe not at the level, they haven't done as much facilitation or focus, and then there's this tentativeness and fear and worry. And we've talked about this, that when I worked with someone where I felt very like I was like
Unworthy.
A little baby chicken, they were like a full-grown chicken, that I was just really not at their level. And this individual pulled me to the side because I was becoming very tentative. And at the end of the first day, we went for a drink. He said, we're going in for a drink. And he asked me what was going on. He gave me some really good observations. And that's when I shared that, I think I wasn't a good co-facilitator for him. And I wasn't really, how could I even support you? And that's when he went time out and said, I'm at my best when you're my equal. And when you stay small, it forces me to come down. I went, oh my God, it was an aha moment for me. So I would say as well, if you are someone that has a skill set like that you bring, and you have someone coming in that's been assigned that might not be at the level of experience that you are, this is something to really pay attention to. You have an opportunity to nurture that person along. And so I usually tell that story and it frees them up.
Mm-hmm.
Because you said something really important earlier, that then they can let me know what they're good at. So that if they're maybe there, and this is interesting where we're going, maybe it's not an equal amount of time. Maybe for this scenario, if you're assigned somebody, it's better if it's 60-40, because that you want them to feel successful. So you want to make sure that we're assigning the roles based on some push, like you said, to stretch you, but also in your comfort zone. So that,
right.
So I would say that's really important to talk about that, because it's easy for someone to be overwhelmed. And I know I was when I saw the level of competency that my partner was at, and I felt like I was, like I said, the baby chick, and going, there's no way, I don't even have a right to be here.
Yeah, so I think what you're getting at is giving your partner, let's say the person who has less experience, a chance to shine where they could shine brightest. And I don't know what the trigger point was where I felt like I was equal, because I know I didn't feel like that until, I'm not even sure when, but I think I've always looked towards you at some level, like if shit hits the fan, you're on. I don't know what's happening, what to do next, so you're up. And I don't know when that changed, where I don't feel like I need to look to you necessarily for the life-saving, life preserver, or whatever it is that whatever metaphor we're playing with. But yeah, where I feel like I am an equal. And maybe it's just been over time, because I've been given a place to shine in places where I'm pretty good. I think it's given me a little bit more confidence in what we've created together, and how we've progressed, and what we've put out into the world. So even owning, I guess, a little bit of owning more of it as I've gone along, and being okay sharing, okay, this is an idea I've got, or this is what I want to do, or because it's not just being told you have an equal voice that you get the equal voice. You have to take that opportunity too. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I'm explaining myself well, but yeah, it feels like it just took me a while to kind of step up to the plate, I guess.
Well, it's given permission. Now you have to step into it.
Right.
Right. So, the baby chick isn't gonna, next minute be, but I being invited to. And I think what I observed changed, Ian, and it might have been a little bit about me, but it also was your confidence as well. Like as you were growing up, is when we started to map out what would happen if this, because we'd have this experience and you would go, Karen, what do you want to do next? And then we would so I want to talk about the feedback model, because we would debrief that afterwards. So when we were getting ready for the next scenario, when we got to repeat the same learning, I would say, okay, Ian, what are we going to do? So you got to say how you would do it.
Mhm.
You started to, well, I think that, so I believe more and more as the experiences happen, we were talking about the what ifs versus being in, oh my gosh, this happened. So I think over time, because we just had those experiences and we did the feedback model, there was some kind of foundation of wisdom that we were both experiencing.
Mhm.
And so as a result of the feedback model, then there was the why I chose that certain strategy. So you were being mentored along kind of through the feedback model, because
Right.
mine was more organic. Okay, this is why I did it, and that it made sense. But when I explained what was going on here in the feedback model, then that was mentoring and learning for you. And then you got to figure out how that would work your way. So you started adding in. It was I don't know if there's a set recipe, but I did notice the shift for sure. And I'm wondering if the feedback model helped that.
It may have. I'm thinking it's maybe like in coaching, you engage the other person to come up with the solutions and answers for themselves because they have their own. So probably along the way, by you continuously asking, okay, what would you do, or what could you do, or how could we do this differently? Just the offer or the ask of how could we do something differently forced me to start giving answers, even because maybe neither of us had an easy or something that came to mind quickly, but it was asking the question to open up the conversation, and then the pinging back and forth would happen. So it would be like a co-creation often. So maybe the confidence came from, yes, my ideas are being considered. Yes, I'm adding. Yes, that's a good one. Take it and run with it, or whatever, right? So realizing that my contribution is an equal benefit to this working out well. Because then I'm owning it, whether it's a graphic or I don't know, an idea of what to ask and where to ask and how to ask. In the process, it made me an equal participant in the process, and it wasn't just being told, so Ian, this next one's going to be yours. How do you want to handle it? Like I wasn't assigned certain things and to do it a certain way. So being able to develop it and create it in tandem, I think supports that relationship and growing and being more collaborative.
Like that. It's time. It takes time. So nurturing that relationship is so important, and starting in your comfort zones, but not staying in your comfort zones. And like I say, stepping in more and mixing it up, and it's so important. One of the things that came to me too with the challenge is that the one thing that's really important is that we're not critiquing each other in the moment. Right, as co-facilitators,
Right.
We have a playful way of doing it, but the worst, and I've seen this where co-facilitators are standing up and correcting the person in the moment. And it's just not a good decision. Like, like, wait a minute, that's wrong. Can we just, so just watching how you do that is so important. And unless it's life altering in the room, in other words, especially when it comes to key instructions, unless it's going to totally the entire next step, it's okay if it's not done perfect. That would be really important as facilitators, that they don't know. And I have seen it happen in a room when I've been, when I'm in the room and going, ooh, that didn't go well there. And it's uncomfortable for everybody, right?
Right. It becomes could become combative, right?
Yeah. And even if we've missed something, a key piece, there's a break. And so that's where you can go over and do a recovery strategy. So it's a really fine line. And you have to trust that part, that can we recover that? I remember one time with Mark, we had this session and we didn't know this, but the clock was, second was moving, but the clock was broken. It wasn't changing time. Can you imagine? And we're using this as our reference.
That's hilarious.
So by the time we get to break, we're like 45 minutes behind. It's my turn to go up. Mark is mortified because he's just ate up my time. And I don't know what happened that day. I swear sometimes there's some kind of crazy divine intervention. I literally was able to deliver everything I had to deliver and finish exactly at noon hour. And he came over and he goes, no idea how you did that. And it didn't feel rushed. I said, you know what? I didn't even think about it. I just went into a zone and it happened. So yeah, like recovery is all, there's a really important piece. You may accidentally, or sometimes you do it and you don't realize it. Like I say, I forgot to hit the timer on my clock, or it was supposed to be timed for 10 minutes. Remember in one of the sessions, I had 2 hours and 10 minutes. So, oh my God. So the buzzer hadn't gone off. So you are, the recovery part's going to be so important, and not freak out in front of people.
Right. And because no one has your roadmap, they don't know what's supposed to be in the plan. They have the general plan or the agenda for the afternoon or whatever, but they don't know the whole thing. So you have those breaks interspersed where you have time to negotiate what can be left off the table and what can be kept. And so that relationship needs to be trusting enough that you guys are going to figure it out in the moment as to what happens next. And what needs to be cut or shortened or reduced or dropped off the table altogether.
And the last really challenge, I would say, and we figured this out too, Ian, is especially in the virtual world, is have a means to communicate other than a chat room. Because it's so easy to accidentally chat the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So, we have a chat on our phones, we have it on silent, so that your communication, if you need to have it, is not within the context of the sphere of the participants in the group, so that doesn't happen.
Right. And it's not a full-blown conversation that's happening in the background. It's little things like we have to wrap up, you've got 1 minute left or something like that. When you know that things have maybe gone a little bit off the rails time-wise, you have a back door where you're not interrupting the flow or breaking concentration or interrupting outright. So it's a nice way to be able to slide things in the back door. You have you get your little note and you're able to more seamlessly do it without being a big waving monster or whatever.
And the last thing I would say, because I know is timing. Have a timer. Like, your timer is so important because you lose track of time.
And especially if you're in makeup mode, right? So where things have shifted from your original roadmap and you have a certain time frame to hit things, those things could now be all out the window. So you can be you may need to be heavily reliant on your co-facilitator to be feeding some of this information via that text message. But if you have your own timer going as well, you can be a little bit more autonomous, and be able to better, because you're going to have to give the floor back to your partner at some point. So you want to set them up. You don't want to steal all their time because you want to stay in the limelight or share what you have to share. Sometimes you've got to be able to let some of that go and be considerate with your co-facilitator.
And that just keeps your relationship healthy. All these things that we just talked about is, at the end of the day, the co-facilitation is a key relationship. It needs to be strong, it needs to be clear about how you want to work together. You develop a rhythm that works for you to weave in and out. So it is a big relationship building commitment that you make to each other. And it evolves, as you've described over the years, that it's changed and flourished and grown and shifted. So it's not a static kind of thing. As you continue to work together, you find, what is the best rhythm for us now. There you go.
Co-facilitation in a nutshell.
It's messy and fun.
Good stuff.